Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Diverse Talk Matters.
To talk about different things around diversity, equity, inclusion, talk about things that people may find challenges with, so we hope you find them really useful. Some are around people's different lived experiences, some really challenging conversation, things that sometimes we don't need to talk about. But we really hope you enjoy the range of topics that we are introducing to you or bringing to you, to your homes, to your house, to your workplaces.
We hope you enjoy. Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Diverse Talk Matters. Today we're talking all things accessibility, AI and disability. As we know, there is a lot to do, so much more to do in terms of disability inclusion, and also with the arrays of AI being used. I've got the wonderful David Bain here, who's going to talk us through it. So welcome, David.
Hi, good afternoon.
Nice to see you.
And you.
Right, so tell us all about yourself then, David. So you've had a really, expansive career in around accessibility. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I've worked in assistive technology, accessibility and disability issues for around about 40 years now. I started out as a teacher, working with kids with what was then described as severe and profound learning difficulties, cerebral palsy and so on. Became the head of a school, did some work for the National Curriculum Council. And then I went to join an NGO, which was focused just on digital accessibility, making technology available to people with disabilities. And I spent 9-10 years there. And at the end of that period, I was speaking at a conference in London, and this nice lady came up to me at the end and said, she was from Qatar, would I be interested in coming and giving them a little bit of advice because they wanted to set up their own centre? I thought, that sounds nice, I'll go over there, it'll be nice and warm. Went for 4 days, ended up staying 7 years.
Wow.
And basically setting up and running it and handing it over towards the end of that period. Came back as an independent consultant, and I've done a number of things then. I do quite a lot of work around what we're going to call disruptive innovation. So what are the new technologies, the new approaches, the new techniques that are changing the way in which we deliver accessibility? That obviously includes artificial intelligence. And with that in mind, I do a lot of work with the Zero Project, heading up the Equitable AI Alliance, which brings together a range of people, including some of the big technology companies such as Google and Microsoft, with disabled persons organisations, with consultants and academics and researchers, really to explore both the opportunities and the risks that AI offers us and how we try to make sure that people with disabilities are at the centre of planning going forward. Beyond that, I also do work on turning policy into practice. We run technology forums where we try to bring innovators and entrepreneurs together with sources of support, and a few other things just for when I'm getting bored.
Definitely wouldn't be getting bored doing all those things, David. Right, so as we know, AI is absolutely huge right now. And if I'm being honest, when it first came around, I was very much, AI, no, it's cheating. But now I'm a convert. But enough of me. Tell us about your view on AI, the good, the bad, this how it can really support disabled people and be more accessible for us all.
I think we have to start by recognising that where we are has been described as the fourth industrial revolution. So the first industrial revolution was mechanical, the second was electronic, the third was digital, and the fourth is artificial intelligence. And what you're starting to see is that those periods of rapid change are compressing. They're getting closer and closer together as innovation and research accelerates. With that in mind, we then also have to remember that we're still at a very early stage in this process of change that's taking place. And to some guess, we're all trying to make predictions and guess what the impact of that will be. But even at this early stage, we can see for people with disabilities, there is a balance for us to understand. There are many, many opportunities. The ways in which artificial intelligence can be combined with other technologies to predict, to anticipate, to make decisions, to provide information, is second to none. So that opportunity is very, very strong. But counterbalancing that, and that I think is particularly true when we talk about the use of AI that is designed for people with disabilities. Where we start to become a little bit more problematic is where we're talking about AI that should be inclusive of people with disabilities and sometimes isn't. And that's particularly true of what we call agentic AI. And agentic AI is basically the idea of AI as an agent. And AI there starts to make decisions on behalf of people. It might look at a child's schoolwork and say, what grade should this be given? And the one which I think most people are aware of is in employment, where it scans a CV, does a video interview, and decides whether or not you're fit for job. Those are where we start to have problems, and where we start to see a degree of bias and discrimination that's unacceptable starting to creep back in.
Yeah, as you were saying that, you were talking about those situations that my head was nodding and shaking at the same time in a way, because absolutely, we know AI can be brilliant, but you hear so many stories, don't we? AI sort of gone wrong, and particularly when you talked about recruitment, I mean, who decides? And the thing is, I often talk about it's who's putting all that AI together, because they're not really often looking in it at a lens of equity for everybody, are they? They're not, the whole thing about who's making, how are they decided to make that decision if that person go through interview? There absolutely could be bias, and the person who's designed it might not even realise it's happening.
Yeah. And we have two really big issues that I've been talking about recently. The first is the data set. So all AI is based on data and the ability to analyze lots and lots and lots and lots of data. And we have two problems there. Is that data when it's looking at people and the attributes of people, to what extent is that inclusive of people with lots of differences, with variables? AI likes the average. It likes the stuff at the middle. And what happens with most AI is those people who don't fit the pattern, whether or not that's because of disability or if it's to do with ethnicity or gender or whatever, people who don't fit the pattern naturally, who aren't part of the main bulk of the data, get excluded. AI says, ignore those. Those are outliers. They're not good data. And that is a problem for us. And then we have a second problem related to that, is that even when we have the data, it's not always easy for developers to know how diverse that data is. Because we have this GDPR thing where we protect anonymity of people. So we don't actually know in many cases even what their gender is, where they're from, and particularly what their disability might be. So that's one huge problem, is to do with diversity of data. It sounds a bit technical, but it's important. It becomes important for people with disabilities because if they're asked, will you allow your data to be used? The answer is you probably should say yes. Because if you don't, there won't be enough of you around to have an influence. The second one is what we call a chain of thought. And that's the questions that algorithms ask of the data. And we need those to be transparent and clear. If it's looking at the features of a person and looking at their eye contact, whether they smile or whatever, on a video interview, we need to know those are the questions that it's asking. And how we ensure, if we take something like Mobius syndrome, is a classic example of a facial palsy, where you can't smile. Your muscles won't let you smile. AI in those video interviews will interpret the fact that you do not smile at any point as being an indicator of your personality. You're maybe not a team player. You don't get on well with people. Well, actually, you may have a great sense of humour. You may be really popular with all your colleagues, but you can't smile to let anybody see it. So those are two of the big challenges.
Yeah. And when you were talking, when you mentioned about the data, and, if somebody's asked you, they say yes. But as you know, you can understand why people do say no. Because if you're disabled, if the stats have been like this for years, you're like twice as likely pretty much to be unemployed than somebody who's non-disabled. Then add on, if you then broke it down to different disabilities for exactly neurodivergence, then there are even higher figures for unemployment, not because they're not got talent or skill, it's because of the bias, because employers aren't equipped to support them. They don't want to make sure they make sure that they're supporting induction to get the best out of them, all those sort of things. And they are not knowledgeable in terms of what works or have those one-to-one discussions. So it's really interesting you say that, because you can understand why there is a resistance to say yes, in terms of, so they can collate it.
Absolutely. And I think, we know that there's been all sorts of problems with data. We see data hacks and identity theft and so on. So I think we need to make some choices, and it's going to be difficult. But I think it becomes a really important role for disabled persons organisations to advise their beneficiaries, the people they're there to represent. What should you do? What data should you share? What is safe to share? What isn't? And of course, that final thing is, when is it in your own interest to share that you have a disability, and when is it not?
Yeah. And where have you seen it? Where have you seen like developers and AI and disability inclusion? Haven't got any good examples where they've really drilled down and looked into this? Because what we hear about often is where it's not particularly worked well. Have you seen anywhere where you've seen it work really well?
So I think it's interesting. Yeah, there are examples where it's working quite well. We're seeing some of the recruitment companies really trying to push forward on understanding the diversity of people who apply for jobs. Companies like Indeed are certainly looking at this in quite a lot of detail. I think the truth is that, as I say, we're still at early days, so it's difficult to know yet. If, for instance, somebody with a disability doesn't get a job, we still don't know why that might be in all cases. Is it because you were discriminated against because of your disability? Or was it because there were people who were better than you on this occasion, which might have been other people with disabilities? We don't know. So I think we're still gathering the data to find out what people are doing well. I do think we are seeing more and more of the big tech companies recognizing there is an issue here. We don't really see a problem with a lot of the AI, for instance, if it's designed for people with disabilities, such as assistive technology, it's not really an issue. If it's being used to give basic information, if I go to ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever and ask questions about disability, I would generally get quite good answers. I was very interested, for instance, recently to know, for people who can't speak, what symbol sets do they use around different parts of the world? And ChatGPT gave me some very useful information on that. I think it's quite good at when we're asking it to do prediction and to anticipate our needs. It's when it's that decision making, and that's the hard edge. And I think that's where we're seeing more and more companies needing to put greater effort. And that, as I say, that includes in all sorts of situations, and particularly I think in health, where people can confuse health needs with disabilities and so on.
So tell me a bit about the health then. So how are they using it?
So in health, I mean, there's the opportunity to use AI tools to screen people's symptoms and make recommendations. Now, the problem is that a symptom of an illness may be very similar to a disability. So if you've got if you've got shake in your hands, that may indicate that there's a problem, that you're ill, or it may suggest that you've got a disability condition such as multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's and so on. So how we treat those are very different, from a symptom of an illness to something that is long-term and needs to be managed. So you can see that we're really gradually refining these sorts of issues. At its best, we're going to get very good answers to putting in our symptoms and getting good answers. And that will actually hopefully speed up the process of getting treatment when we need it, both for people with disabilities and those without.
Okay. And so these groups you're on, so I'm looking at do these groups focus on this? So you've got the Zero Project, AI, the Alliance. Are they the ones that support this, or are they different?
The Alliance is an initiative of the Zero Project, done with the Seneca Trust, based in London. So it's an initiative where we're focusing on one specific area of innovation and innovative practice. So with the Alliance, what we're trying to do is raise awareness, share resources, get people talking to each other, and to try to put people with lived experience of disability at the forefront of the debate. There was a very strong argument when we're talking about AI design that if we start with the outliers and plan for them, we then work inwards towards the average, rather than starting with the average and then discarding the outliers.
Yeah, I always say, when I talk about inclusion and lots of different things, that if you're thinking about, for example, neurodivergence and being inclusive, neurodivergent people and being inclusive disabled people, you're going to be inclusive to a lot of more people, full stop, just by doing that. And it's not hard. And often people think, oh, it's hard. There's this whole myth about, people who've got disability or neurodivergence, that their needs are going to be so great. Not at all. And it's about understanding that, and people, make sure they train their teams, they will have that awareness so they can do what they need to do. But there's so many myths out there and misconceptions.
I think you're quite right. I think there's a lot of myths around the use of technology to support people with disabilities. A lot of people are concerned that this is going to be extremely expensive. The research shows that actually in most cases it's not. Many of the features and functions that people need are already built into their computers, their phones, their tablets. And then it's often peripherals and other things to go around. So for the vast majority of the disabled population, much of what they need and want is available at low cost. For some of the disabled population, yes, there's much more expensive items that will be needed, whether that comes from the company as an employer or whether it comes from public purse, government, and so on. But I think that myth that one, it's going to be complicated, and two, it's going to be expensive is changing. And I think AI will change that still more. We're certainly seeing mainstream technologies being used to support individual needs. I think my favourite example, because it's one I use all the time, is Grammarly.
Oh, I love Grammarly.
Grammarly was never designed for people with dyslexia, but it actually contains many of the features that people with dyslexia have asked for in terms of improving their productivity, the accuracy and quality of their writing, and so on. For some of that population, that will not be enough. They will need added features. So we see this escalation process from what's available built into the computer, what's available at low cost because it's available for lots of people, but what is a specialist technology that a relatively small proportion. That lets us allocate our resources when they're most needed.
Yeah. And I think we do not use the free information that's out there. Like I say, I love Grammarly, and I use the free option because I actually got it for one of my team. I said, oh, this is really good. It might be useful to help when scribing and writing things. And then I thought, well, I'll have a little bit of a go at this. And it's so good in terms of making sure that what you're writing is clear and in the right way grammatically. But also, Microsoft, oh my gosh, has so many. I know there's tools that I'm not using, but when I go, oh, let me have a look and see if I can do this. Like if I do the accessibility of a document, you can do the accessibility checker, for example, on it. Takes a little bit of time and that's it. And once you've done it a few times, it takes you hardly any time. And I think every employer should do something about making sure people use those, because it's there, they're using it every day and they're not using the function, like even the speaking out, all those things.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting because you are absolutely right. Companies, whether they be Microsoft, Google, Apple, have all built in a multitude of assistive technologies, assistive features and functions into their products. We should recognize that's been done for many, many years. But it's like a box of ingredients with no recipe book.
100%.
So where do we get the recipe book from? Now, this is where I think it gets interesting. If you have a Windows PC, I would say go to Copilot or ChatGPT or Grok or whatever and say, I have a disability. I find it difficult to do A, B, C, and D. What are the features and functions within Windows and Microsoft Office, for instance, that I should use and test to support me? So let the AI write you your initial recipe. If that doesn't work, it needs tuning and so on, you can either ask the AI for more specific questions, or then you can go to a professional and ask for such an occupational therapist, occupational health, and ask for more detailed, personalised information.
100%. Everybody listening out there or watching, get on there, because and I think it's good for anybody, even if you wanted to say, I mean, like I said, it's brilliant for disabled people. You could say, I struggle with writing long, writing reports. I want to make it this. I want to do this. What accessibility? So it could absolutely be there for so many people. And again, use it. It's there. And I think it's a shame that, people don't look into it as much. We're all not lazy, but we're all just to do what we used to doing, don't they? We don't think, oh, let me try and find this out.
And I think we are going through some of the same cycles that we've seen before. I think early on you just mentioned the idea that AI is cheating in some way. Now, when I was a kid, that was exactly what was said about having calculators in the classroom.
Yes.
Then it was about having computers in the classroom.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure when they introduced paper and you had to move away from the slate,
Exactly.
where
An
people
old
were saying,
chalk.
well, it's not fair that they can carry all this lightweight material. It's not fair on those who are still carrying the pieces of rock.
Yeah, yeah.
So I do think, we go through these cycles with every innovation. The other thing about AI, which is going to happen, is that I think within 5 years, you won't even realize you're using AI. It will be so embedded within the tools that we're using
Yeah.
that actually it won't even be that we're thinking, I'm using an AI tool. It's just, I'm using technology. And that again, classic example, if you go onto Netflix, for example, you probably don't realize that it's AI which is making recommendations to you as to what you want to watch next. Yeah. It's all done with AI algorithms based on what you've looked at, viewed, and so on, and what you might have said you liked. So, but we don't think that's an AI tool that's doing it.
Yeah.
We just think that's a set of recommendations.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, again, is how we're going to see things change.
It definitely is there. And also, much as I know with any new technology, it's benefited some and not others, because I know there's also a thing about jobs, that it's impacting on people's jobs. But it is, if you look at the positive of it, it supports you to do things more efficiently. For me, I love using it. I've got a bit of brain fog and I'm like, oh my God, I want to do this, but I'm not quite sure how to say it. And you're like, wonderful, so there's definitely the benefits of it. But I know there's obviously the challenges of it. Some people it may impact differently in terms of what roles they may be carrying
group
out.
that worries me most, Natasha, is people with learning difficulties, intellectual cognitive disability. Because we know that one of the things that AI does extremely well is repetitive tasks, doing the same thing over and over again. It's very good at slightly adjusting a task according to the information it's getting in. So, if you go to like a shopping mall or an airport, increasingly you're going to see fewer and fewer cleaners and more robots. Because the robots just keep going. They just run and run and run. They need charging. You set them going, run, and they can do all the different rooms. They've got all the different things they need with them. So for those people who have been working in manual labor or semi-skilled labor, that is the market where I think we're going to see the biggest, quickest impact on job opportunities in the workforce. Now, there we have a problem, because the reason why many people have gone into those jobs is because they struggle to learn the higher order skills that the new work needs. So how do we square that circle? It's the jobs that they can do, which they take pride in, which boost self-esteem, self-value, may well disappear. What are the jobs that will replace it for that group? And that worries me. That I see as a problem.
It's like we need, and I think anybody who is an employer who does have those roles, is there another role whether it's teaching them to use AI to do something else? I don't know what, but
yeah, that's what we
using
don't know.
AI, getting, everybody, disabled or not, to be more, all of us could, I can't, over the last year, I've gone from not using it at all to using it, regular-ish. And again, you need to bring everybody with you, don't you, on that journey, in terms of if it's going to help people to be more effective in whatever role that is.
So I think we do have some challenges there, and I think a lot of the debate and discussion that I see at diversity, equity, and inclusion conferences is much more around middle class jobs, as teachers,
Yeah,
nurses,
so true.
doctors. They are not the ones. Often we talk about that AI is going to have two impacts. For many people, it's going to enhance their working life. But for others, it's going to fundamentally replace their working life. And it's that second group, which I think we have to think about very hard.
Definitely. That's when we talk about what are the risks, really, aren't we? You've got the positive for the AI, but the risks are about, people who, like you said, there's repetitive roles. Any other risks, do you think, with AI when it comes to disabled people at all, or any broader accessibility?
I think one of the biggest things we need to be conscious of is dependency.
Yeah.
Good use of AI requires you to think critically.
Yeah.
Not to take an answer, information, guidance, a decision without questioning it.
Yeah.
So I was doing a piece of research using ChatGPT a few days ago, and I asked it about a company's products and how they were being used, and it gave me an answer. 90% of it, I thought, "Yep, that was." I thought, you know what? I didn't know the company made that product. So I went searching. I thought, I've never heard of it. They never mentioned it to me. We've never talked about it. That's because they don't make it.
No.
So we have this thing of hallucinations. Sometimes AI gets confused, just like we all do. We misunderstand things. So we have to use AI to enhance our experience and knowledge. And we need to be able to question and say, you know what? I'm not sure that's right. Let me go and check.
100%. And I think, if anybody's listening out there, use it wisely because I'll sometimes put something in, I'll go, that's rubbish. That doesn't, you know what I mean? I'll go, no, don't get me wrong. It could have been me not asking the right things, but I'm thinking, no, that's not what. And I think you have to have the knowledge anyway. I mean, particularly if I'm talking about work that we do, in terms of, when I use AI, sometimes I put things in and it was absolute, I'm asking something and it's absolute rubbish. And I'm like, no, that's not what I needed. It's not interpreting, but it could be what I've put in. But also what I was saying, in terms of DI work, we've been doing this job for years. And if I put something in, ask a question, or I don't know, to clarify something, I'll go, that's not right. And I think the sad thing is, it's at least we've got the knowledge, and whoever's skilled in their roles, it's not just us, but anybody in their role, please use, we should be using it right in the right way. Whereas non-knowledgeable or skilled person in any role really could be using it as a cheat or a cutting. Well, really, they can't define or know what's right and what's wrong. So people really need to use it appropriately.
So it's really important when you get information back in AI to look at the source of the information. Ask it to tell you where it's got it from. And is that a valid source? Because it may be that it's a third-party review of a product, for instance, rather than directly from the manufacturer and so on. So I think that is really important. But you are right on the other thing you said there, which is about one of the skills that we think that more and more people with disabilities are going to have to learn is writing prompts. So another project I have, a not-for-profit company, is around this idea of creating symbols for communication. And we have an AI tool that automatically creates symbols for ideas, concepts, words that anybody might want to use anywhere in the world. And it can be refined for language and culture. But to do it effectively, you have to describe what you want well. So we were looking at it, and somebody had put that they wanted a symbol for boy for Kenya. And when they looked at it, they rated the symbol it produced low and said it wasn't specific enough. But our question would be, so, okay, you need to tell it how specific you want it to be. So it's a boy from this part of Kenya wearing these types of clothes, generate a symbol. And I think that the components of what's technically called prompt engineering is going to be one of the most important things for people to learn. How do I structure the words to get the best from an AI tool? Whether I'm writing it or whether I'm asking my Echo or Google Home projects, how do I ask it the right question? Because if I ask it the wrong question or I ask the question badly, it's more likely to give me rubbish out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think employers, because I've got friends of mine and colleagues as well, who their employers are saying to them, use Copilot, use chat. They're encouraged to. It's like not forced upon them, but they're strongly encouraged to use it. And I think I should check, but I would like to know how much training or how they've had or guidance in using it properly.
Yeah. And what we found when we did some research recently, looking exactly at this issue, where people have been using lots of different AI tools for some period, they can take on new ones quite quickly and can do it quite well. When they have got strong subject matter knowledge to base those questions on, they can do that. When it is something which they haven't been used to doing, they don't interact with technology in that way, people find that extremely difficult. When they've basically been recipients and not co-creators of resources, they find that very, very difficult to do. So it's a whole new set of skills, and it needs to be practiced and learned just like any other skill. Again, I would come back to disabled persons organisations and say, over the next 2 years, you need to be building this experience amongst the disabled community so they can use AI effectively. Because, of course, there's the other side of that, which is AI learns from its users. So when it gives you an answer, you say, that's great, you give it a thumbs up, it learns, okay, so that's a question about disability, and that person thinks it's great. Every time I give that answer, 95% of people think it's great. I've learned from that. That's going to be the basis for my next evolution. So it is important to get this right. It is important for people with disabilities to be engaged and to be using the technologies and giving that feedback on what's working well, what's accurate and high quality, so it gets better in the future as well.
Definitely, 'cause it needs to work for everyone, doesn't it? It shouldn't
It
be
really does.
just work for one type of people, a person. You've did a lot of work with assistive technology, which obviously led you to AI. What is your experience of employers and supporting their teams who are disabled in terms of AI? Is there any good examples or any good things that you've learned from all that work, or even sort of things that are really good? Sort
I
of
mean,
good bits of kit.
so many companies, I think, everything from the access to work scheme through to employers' own internal schemes. I think that the idea that we can adapt and build upon the technologies that we provide to every employee is pretty well embedded in an awful lot of companies now. The idea that, that somebody who's blind can use a screen reader or use a magnifier, certainly in the public sector and increasingly in the private sector. I think the only point I would make about that is I think an awful lot of the examples that are given are based upon quite large companies, corporates. For me, we know that, 70%, 75% of all employment is in the SME sector, all the medium-sized businesses. And I do think that sometimes we try to adapt the advice that is given to somebody who's got their own HR department, can buy in specialists. But if you're a small company of 3 to 5 people and you'd like to include a person with a disability in your workforce, you think, yep, ethically, morally, I think this is a great idea. I'm going to try and do this. And then you get told how much there might be costs involved. And you're thinking, well, there's nobody else to do it. And whilst I'm doing this, I'm not running the other parts of my business. So SMEs are different. And I think we need to understand that and give them greater support to unlock the use of assistive technologies, particularly the free and low cost things that people have.
Yeah. So if somebody, you're talking about SME, because like you say, the bigger organisations, they've got the money. They might even have somebody who's is accessibility. That's their job. What advice you give to organisation that wants to start improving accessibility, doesn't know where to start? Like, oh my gosh, what do I do?
Well, I think it depends what you're doing and this context you're in. So if you're going to talk about accessibility and people are coming to an office, physically, is it accessible? Can everybody get in? Can they open the doors? If there's stairs, are there lifts and alternatives, and so on and so on. If your work is predominantly digital and you need people to work in the digital sphere, and that's, for most people, that's a huge area now. There are lots of things you can do to check that the materials that you're producing, that the tools that you're using are accessible to a wide range of needs. What I would say to people is anticipate. Assume that at some point you're going to have a disabled person. When you're buying software for your company, ask the question, has this been tested for people with disabilities? It could be your banking software, it could be your customer management system, and make that one of your criteria. Anticipate and predict that you're going to have people's needs, including the fact that at some point, if you've got a team, at some point, one or more of those is going to become disabled. And if you've invested all that time in their training and experience, you don't want to lose it just because you made a bad decision 3 years ago about the software you provide.
No, definitely. And, it's also important to, ask the question. So a lot of people, like you're saying, you should be thinking about, am I being included? What do I need to say with person? Actually, in the Equality Act, it's meant, when it comes to disability, you're meant to be anticipatory anyway.
Yes.
People should be thinking, right, if I have a disabled person, somebody becomes disabled, absolutely. Think more broadly of the now. Think of the future.
I think the anticipatory thing is a little bit problematic because there were so many different disabilities.
I know, but even if you I say to people, build it as you go along, because you're never going to be able to think of absolutely
You're right.
every
You're right. So start
issue,
from the
but
core, start
consider
from what you
different
can do
ones.
easily and have some success. And of course,
Yeah,
really importantly, when somebody with a disability joins, ask them, what support do they need? What has worked well for them in the past? And to see if that will work for you. Very, very often, if somebody has come out of school with some qualifications or gone to college or university and got more qualifications, they're not going to have done that without assistive technologies. So those technologies may work perfectly well for your business. So, it's not necessary that you're always starting from a blank sheet. And the expert in what works well for them often is the person with disabilities themselves.
unless they just become disabled. But I always say that to people. I say, at the interview stage, you should be asking anybody out there. I'm sure most of you do it now anyway. Do you need any adjustments to attend the interview? When someone you're off sending a job offer. Do you need, great, congratulations. We're going to take references. Let us know if you need any adjustments or support, accessibility. They should be asking all the way through the employee journey, which I think a lot of people don't. They ask it at the interview part, might ask it when they start, but it should, to me, I always say to people, it should be an ongoing question in terms of, because something could have changed. As you know, we're going to be more likely to have greater needs or become disabled as we get older. So for me, as well, as about asking throughout the whole cycle of someone being there, in their annual reviews, their one-to-ones, everything all right, anything I need to know about, because we know that sometimes people might not say at the beginning, but absolutely, if they're already disabled and they've come into the organisation, like you've said already, a lot of people know what works for them, and it's just making sure that is implemented where possible.
And I think the other thing to always remember as a small business or a medium-sized business is that what you're learning from your disabled employees, you can apply to your disabled customers.
Definitely.
And that is of value. I don't think it's, and it's sometimes said that, if you haven't done it, then you won't have any disabled customers. And that probably isn't true, to be fair, because people with disabilities have become very good at finding workarounds of their own. But if you want to unlock the potential of that market, and nowadays we can't afford to lose customers in any area, then yeah, using that experience and knowledge that your employees have will give you a competitive advantage.
Definitely. And also, as you're, delivering service or selling products, do check-ins, do service, get feedback from people. Did you get what you needed? Could we be, did we meet your access needs and that sort of, because like I said, it's an evolving thing. And, what's going to be available now? God, can you imagine what's going to be available in 5 years? It's going to be weird and wonderful and brilliant. So it's
Yeah,
also
I think. I
keeping
mean,
in
I think
touch with that.
one of the big areas you're going to see in the next 5 years is autonomous wheelchairs.
Really loving that.
So the idea that somebody's got to have really good fine motor control to drive around a building to get to the building, actually the wheelchairs will drive themselves and be safe. So some of the things that worry us about somebody's skills, say in that case, may become less of an issue in the future. So yeah, I've often said that actually I don't think that necessarily that awareness is the biggest barrier to access any longer. I think creativity and imagination might be applying this technology in new and imaginative ways.
Yeah. Lovely. Talking of sort of accessibility needs, are there any resources? Is there anywhere you would point anybody, whether they're an SME, an organisation, think, you know what, because I've heard people say to me, I haven't got any disabled people in my work. I'll go, really? Do you know you have? And also, if you not haven't, you will be having soon. So are there any resources? If anybody wants us to start, they hadn't even thought about accessibility, they've not thought about AI, are there any places where people could go to start that sort of journey?
One of the things that I as a consultant, when I'm working, before I ever started working with the Zero Project, I would often get asked for examples of somebody who's solved this problem before. And one of the places I went to get that information was the Zero Project's database.
Okay.
So from all over the world, they've got examples of innovative practice and policy that has been effective within a community. Now, they've now recently augmented that with their own AI tool, which analyzes all those answers and gives you ones that's most suitable for you. So I would say if you really want to see what's happened in different parts of the world that might be helpful to you, the Zero Project database is a really good starting point. The second place I found unbelievably useful around consumer technologies is what's called the GARI database. That's GARI. and it's gary.info. If you want a mobile phone that is going to be usable and accessible, whether that's as a student, an employee, an employer, or whether it's just for independent living, you can go into that database, say, I need a phone that works for people who are blind and want to do these things on it. And it will tell you which phones in your region are available to you. So it means that when you then go into the shop or go online, you can find the best price for the ones that actually has been recommended as being effective. I think the third source I would recommend to employers, because I found it incredibly helpful, is an AI tool called AT-Visor, as in advise, but AT-Visor. And what that will do is it'll ask you to build a profile of a user based on what are your disabilities, what tasks do you want to do, what's the setting, and what technologies and techniques have you used, what tools. And then it will match you to people like you and tell you which solutions they found most useful and purchased. So rather than it just being matching, it's actually going to tell you people who match your profile chose these solutions. You can do that as an employer as much as an employee.
Brilliant. I like that. Lovely.
Anything that makes it simple. And of course, we come back to just using those AI tools, asking the right questions and asking different questions if the first one doesn't give you a good answer.
Yeah, exactly. As you were talking, what sprang to my head was the Disability Confidence Scheme. So I don't know if anybody out there listening or watching is a part of that. So anybody could join the Disability Confidence Scheme. And as you know, it's a project around supporting disabled people into work. And there's different initiatives you can do, whether it's give somebody work experience, a job, or those things. But I know a long time ago, I haven't been engaged in this much lately. They also used to give like resources and tools and information. So I'm maybe now with the whole world of AI, you can't get away from it. I wonder if they're equipped to be providing any information. I need to check that out. But again, people look that up, Disability Confidence Scheme, because once you sign up to say you want to be more supportive to disabled employees, you generally get a wealth of information to support you doing that.
And I think there's also, I would also recommend that joining and engaging with one or two relevant LinkedIn groups is also a good way of getting answers. And I think that LinkedIn, in terms of this sort of level of detail that you want, is possibly the best social media for that, because you will get answers from people that said, yeah, I had that problem and this is what we did. Yeah, we couldn't make that software run on our computers because of this. This is what we did.
Mm.
So I do think some of those are very helpful, but do hand pick them. Don't join lots. Don't join ones that are not central to the topic you want to discuss, because you may not get answers that are helpful. But just a little bit of time researching communities. Don't think of them as LinkedIn groups. They're small communities of people talking about the same thing as you. You don't need to stay there forever. Just stay there as long as it's helpful.
There's so many good resources like that now, whether it's like Facebook groups, so many things out there. Social media is, it has its good and its bad, but in terms of support groups and information, it's really, really good, isn't it? Right.
The one thing that you bear in mind is, if somebody gives you a piece of advice, see if anybody else disagrees, because invariably this is all opinion. It may well have worked well, but why did it work well? Why made it work well in one company but not another? What was the difference? That's the other question you want to have in.
Brilliant. And as you mentioned earlier as well, for anybody thinking, oh my gosh, I can't afford this, somebody might need something. You mentioned it earlier, but just to mention it again, the Access to Work government scheme, where they will support you with financially if you, depending on how much your company makes, you might get different areas of support, depending on what it is. But at least that is there for employees to look into too, because some people don't realise they've not always got to pay for it all themselves as well.
That's, I think, especially for smaller companies, that's particularly important.
Definitely.
Cost
right, David, is there anything else? I always like to ask people, because I think I've asked you quite a lot and you've gave us lots of information. Is there anything you would like to share at all on accessibility, on AI and disability that you feel you haven't had an opportunity to share yet?
I think I would just come back to almost where we started. We're at the beginning of another industrial revolution, of a period of rapid change. There will be winners and losers in that. as there have been in every of the others. What I would say to people is look for the opportunities. Where there are things that are not working well, work with them to make them better, because this isn't going to go away. We can't pretend it's not going to happen. So that would be my main message to people, is engage with the technology, engage with the people building it and implement it, and just make sure that your voice is heard.
Lovely, thank you. And David, if anyone wants to find out any more about you, want to speak to you, how do they find out about you?
They're very welcome to email me, or they'll find me on LinkedIn, and actually most social media, you'll find me there somewhere.
Okay, lovely.
Talking both on X and Blue Sky and Facebook, and of course LinkedIn.
Lovely. So David Baines, Banes, anybody out there? So look for David. You will find him if you need any information on accessibility in AI, particularly around disability.
Look forward to hearing from you.
Lovely. So thank you, David. It's been fabulous. And again, like I say, we've got to all get with the program around AI, but also I stress again, those developers need to make sure when they are doing AI that it's inclusive to everybody, including disabled people. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We may call you back again. You never know, but it's been fabulous. Until next time.
Please do, and I'll tell you all the things I got wrong and the new ones that I'm guessing at.
We can maybe do like in a year's time.
Yeah, sounds good.
What's happened? Where are we now? Right, lovely. So thanks, David. Appreciate your time. Everybody listening and watching. Until next time, we will see you then. Bye for now.
Been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Please do spread the word about our channel and tune in for our next episode.